Hey everyone, welcome to Stuff I Never Learned from a School Book. If you are looking at the bearded one, that means it's Monday night, 7 p.m. Central, 8 Eastern, 6 Mountain, 5 Pacific, 2 out in Hawaii, 6 a.m. tomorrow out in Indonesia, 9 a.m. tomorrow out in Australia. Welcome everybody to Stuff I Never Learned from a School Book. If this is your first time here, welcome. My name is Tom Springer. I am the host of the show. Um, it's been a couple weeks since I've been on because I travel a lot, and just straight up front, just letting people know, hey, this show I'm going to have on, and then I'm off for 3 weeks. So just a fair warning for those people who normally watch the show, I will be off for a little bit. But after that, I'll tell you who's coming on and everything else. But let's go ahead and jump in right away because I have on a very good friend of mine. I mean, we actually call each other brothers now. And we like hanging out and all that wonderful stuff. So let me go ahead and bring in the most amazing, the infamous, the legend of legends, Joe Franke. Where you at? How come you're not coming in? Hold on, let me get a hold of you so you can actually pop into here.
I'm blushing.
There you are. There you are. Let me get into here and remove this one really quick. So there we go. Joe, how you doing,
I'm
brother?
good, brother. How are you? Thanks for having me on.
Good. Oh, absolutely. So I always like to tell people how we met. And funny enough, you and I really didn't know each other too much until we had the chance to go hang out at Orlando
MegaCon.
Like I knew who you were,
Yeah.
I knew a lot of the background about you and everything else, but I didn't know as much as I do now. But mostly how I knew you was from Bill.
Yeah,
Um,
now you know. Now you know too much.
well, the whole thing is now I know the truth because Bill lies, just out straight up. So we'll just get that out there. Um, but but I'm popping. So Kenneth Torres, hey Kenneth, how you doing? He's popping in to say hi. How you doing,
Hey,
Kenneth?
Padre. Love you,
Um,
brother.
Sandy Souza's popping in. Hi, Sandy. How are you? Um, Asia's on here somewhere. She just hasn't popped in to say hi yet. But because
I think she's mad at me too.
Kenneth just said hi to her too, so I can see that she's not. I can't see she's on here, but Kenneth sold her out. But anyways, I want to thank you for coming on the show. Um,
Thank you.
and like I said, we met not too long ago at Orlando MegaCon, but it was like an instant connection. At least I felt it. I was like, man, and it was really cool because like
Oh yeah,
instantly there was like a almost like we've known each other our whole lives type of connection. And it was
exactly. just gonna say that. Yeah.
yeah, and it was amazing. So oh, there's Asia, she's popping in now, and then Miss Nicole Springer, my wonderful wife, is popping in to say hi and welcome to the show.
Hi, Nikki.
So so that's how we met. But then we kind of the first meeting was just kind of, hey, this is who I am, this is who I am, and Bill's like, this is the guy that runs my Midwest team for PERS, but then we just got to sit down and talk and everything else, and I got to meet your wonderful wife, your better half by far. Um, and
Yes,
Nikki's my better half by far
she
too. So
is.
yeah, so um, but then we got to sit down and just kind of talk, and got to know
Mm.
each other really well, and it really was like an instant connection, and it was kind of cool because I have that connection with some people, but not everybody, but yours was really instantaneous. So I really appreciate that because it kind of gave me an insight to who you were outside of the famous person that everyone knows tied to the Warrens. I got to see what's behind the curtain. So
Oh, God.
uh, but do me a favor as people pop in and
Sure.
say hi. Introduce yourself. Let us know who you are. Let us know what you do and how you got to how you started doing what you do now.
Well, thank you very much, Tom, for being so gracious. And yes, it was an instant connection, really, with you and I. That's why we call each other brothers.
Right?
I mean, that's the way I approach life anyway. Look, we're all brothers and sisters in this world, regardless of what your background is, what color you are, what political beliefs or whatever. But so anyway, for anybody who doesn't know, my name is Joe Franke. I've been a paranormal researcher now for 40 years. Um, and I got started way back when I was 18 years old, uh, fresh out of high school. Um, about a month or two after I graduated high school, I met my lovely bride, Laurel. And she is my better half. I tell you, I owe that woman my life, and I mean that sincerely. And we were dating at the time, and she saw in a local newspaper where there was an article, or I'm sorry, an ad that Ed and Lorraine Warren were going to be speaking at the couple of exits down the highway at hotel. What the Warrens used to do back in the day is they used to do a lot of lecturing at colleges and high school auditoriums. And what they would do is they would rent out a room at a hotel, and then, advertise tickets, and, it was 10, 15, $20. I'm not sure what it was.
Yeah.
But anyway, so Laurel and I were just newly dating. We'd only been dating a few months. And she said, "Hey, the Warrens are going to be, lecturing down at the Holiday Inn down the road. Would you like to go?" I was like, "Sure." So we get in the car, we go down there, and I remember this like it was 5 minutes ago. Lorraine was standing at the table there, like, meeting, greeting everyone, and selling the tickets. And she looked at me like, she cocked her head to the side. I remember she's like, "Honey, have we met before?" And she's looking at me like, you look at somebody and you're like, "I know this person. I know them. I'm just trying to picture what their name is or where I know them from or whatever." And I said, "No, Lorraine." I said, "I've heard a lot about you and Ed." I said, "I've seen you on television, heard you on the radio, print media. I mean, this is long before the internet, you know." And she's just looking at me. She said, she goes, "There's a reason why you're here tonight, honey." She called everybody honey. She was such a sweetheart. She goes, "Make sure you come and see Ed and I after the show. Would like to talk to you." So I'm all excited here. Here I am. First time I've ever been to anything like this. Uh, and so I met Ed and Lorraine there, and I also met Tony Sparrow, their son-in-law, who was there at the time as well. And so we get through the show, and Tony and Ed were packing up, and Lorraine, God love her, she would stay behind and try to answer everyone's questions.
Right.
She didn't want to leave anybody, and people would just crowd around her. And Ed was like, "Come on, Lorraine, I'm hungry. Let's go." So what we did was, we used to go to out to a diner afterwards, after lecturing or after a case. We would convene at a diner and talk about the events of the evening. So we're sitting there, and Lorraine's sitting across from me. I remember Laura was on my left, and then Ed and Tony, and she was holding my hands. And then she explained to me what she was doing. She was reading my aura. Lorraine had the ability to read people's auras. And for those of you that may not know what an aura is, it's a supernatural glow that emanates from all of us.
So can I say something really quick? Can I interrupt you really quick, Joe?
Yeah, sure.
It's funny because I was going to tell you right now your aura is blue and it has and the outside of it is green. So right now your aura is actually pumping blue and the outside of it is pumping green. So just so you know.
Is that a good thing?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So yeah, and so she's holding my hands and she's really studying me. She goes, "Honey, I could tell by your aura that you were meant to do this work." She goes, "Would you like to come and work with Ed and I guess?" I'm like, without skipping a beat, I'm like, "Yeah, of course, I would love to." I mean, I was honored to have been invited to join their group of students. I guess what they were doing is they had a handful of people. I call them students or pupils, and they used to have classes at a place called Hawley Manor in Newtown, Connecticut. And it was it's called the Inn at Newtown, I guess now, but it wasn't much bigger than a coat closet. This little tiny room in the back, and every Monday night from I think it was from 7 to 9, like 2 hours, they would have classes. And what those classes would entail, I remember vividly the first time Ed came in and he was carrying a box, and in the box he had a VCR, he had some tapes, he had some books, he had some notes, he had a little TV he brought in. Way back in the day when they had VCRs. I mean, some people don't know what those are, but
Yeah.
and that's when I first started to learn about what we call the more iconic cases today, like the cases that they had that the Conjuring movies are based on, the Amityville case, of course, Annabelle. That's when I first learned about this stuff. And Ed would play videotapes, old grainy videotapes and audio tapes from cases. And okay, kids, he always called me kid. Okay, kid, this is what we're going to do today. And I'm going to talk to. I remember he said, "I'm going to talk to you about Amityville." And it was really awesome. I was like, I had goosebumps. My goosebumps had goosebumps. I was so nervous, but I was so intrigued. and I probably was a little bit scared too because I didn't know what to expect, and um, as our relationship grew through the years, I didn't look at them as like the world famous Warrens. They were
Yeah.
like Graham and Gramps. They were like
Right.
grandparents to me. And to jump ahead a little bit, it's kind of strange because I'm the age now that the Warrens were when I met them.
Right.
So I'm almost 58 years old. Laurel's, I'm not going to mention her. She'll kill
Laurel's,
me.
Laurel's 39.
But
Yeah. Laurel's 39.
Laurel and Lorraine were very close, and Ed and I, um, he loved me. I know he did. He used to tease me. He goes, "Joe, you're the grandson I always wish I had, or I always wanted."
Right.
Just to tease Chris, his grandson. But Ed would call me up on a Saturday or a Sunday and say, "Hey, kid, what are you up to today? What are you doing today?" "Oh, nothing. I was just hanging out. I was going to cut the grass." I said, "What do you need something? I can come down." He goes, "Yeah, come down for a few hours. I want to go over some stuff with you." And his office was right off the museum at the house. And I would sit there with him and he would go over some case histories and he'd bring one of the artifacts from the museum in his office and say,
Hmm.
"Okay, this was a bad case. This artifact came from that case." And he would talk to me about it. Obviously, the most famous being the Annabelle doll.
Right. Yeah.
And this is how I learned, like almost like one on one
Hmm.
with them. And Laurel and Lorraine were up in the kitchen having tea and crumpets or whatever. But Laurel was involved a lot back then, but she would like take notes and she would assist Lorraine with documenting stuff. Lorraine would go through the mind's eye. She'd be interviewing spirits, and Laurel would be over there writing stuff down. And but then when the kids started coming, Laurel, she backed out. She's not actively involved in cases. She hasn't been for many, many years.
Yeah.
But and I know I get long winded, but these are very fond memories that I have of how I got started, and I have a very unique history. I mean,
Yeah.
really, there's not many people that can say that they had that kind of history with the Warrens. I mean, of course, you've got John Zaffis, my friend John, who's their nephew.
Hmm.
Ed had a twin sister that was John's mom,
Hmm.
and of course, Chris, their grandson and stuff. But I used to go over to the house and help him, and if he needed something, help with yard work or whatever he needed me, I'd help him.
Right.
But he would teach me things, and he would teach me demonology.
Hmm.
How he learned. Ed was recognized by the Catholic Church as a layman demonologist, and I learned demonology from him, and the whole hierarchy of demons and fallen angels. Demons are angels; they're just fallen angels, and I have such fond memories of those days, and God, I miss both of them. I wish they were still here. I mean, sometimes I'll get stuck on a case, and I'm like, God, I wish they were here. I have questions. You
Yeah.
know, fast forward 40 years later, I'm still involved in the work.
Right.
You know, we just, as you remember, we are just prepared to do a hard launch of the Warren Society for Paranormal Research and Education. With our good friend, Bill Slevin. Uh, is
Who's
he?
on
Yeah.
here? He's listening.
Well, it's
Yeah.
very important. It was always a dream of mine to honor their legacy and their life's work, and to continue the work. I remember, Lorraine. Ed
Hmm.
passed away many years ago, but Lorraine would say, "Honey, I would love for you to continue to work long after we're gone." I said, "Look, as long as I got breath in my body and I'm able, I will." I mean, I've got some health issues
Right.
myself that I'm battling, but I do a lot of consulting, you know, um, and things like that. If I'm not well enough to go on a case physically, I won't go. Because some of these
Right.
cases they could be nothing, or they could be something
Yeah.
diabolical. You just never know. But you got to be prepared. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst. So,
Right.
matter of fact, it was probably a couple of years before I actually went on a case on my own or with another investigator. I
Hmm.
was always working with Ed or with Ed and Lorraine. Both of them. It was usually the three or the four of us. Sometimes once the
Right.
kids started coming, Laurel started having the kids, she would stay home and tell me about it,
No,
But there was a
yeah.
case we worked on. I remember my son was just an infant. He was maybe 2 or 3 months old because he hadn't been baptized yet. And Ed's like, he's like, yeah, Joe. He
Hmm.
goes, we got to go out to this place, but you can't come. I don't want you there because Joey's not baptized yet. And he was just being very
Yeah.
careful. He was very protective of me, as I am of
Hmm.
everybody. I'm personally responsible for our team. God forbid something should happen to
Right.
someone because I put them in a situation that they weren't prepared for. That's why the education
Right.
aspect of this is vital. And I always say,
Right.
look, I don't know everything. I don't profess to know everything. Okay. But I've learned a lot in 40 years. And what I like to do is share my knowledge with the world or whoever wants to listen. I do a lot of lecturing around the country. I do a lot of public libraries, some colleges, high schools, like the Warrens did. But I am responsible for the safety of our team. And I'm like,
Right.
Papa Bear, they used to call me in Little League, but I have to be smart about it as well. I've got,
Hmm.
Father Bob and Father Ken, God bless them. They're my spiritual advisors as well as my good, trusted friends.
Uh-oh. I lost Joe for a second. Stand by. Figured out what happened to him. Unless it's me, people still see me. Let me know if you can still see me. So, we just lost Joe for a second. Is it me or Joe?
I's are dotted and your T's
Oh,
are crossed. You know, Too many people today, they just want, oh, I want a case. They're what I call thrill seekers. And I'm not trying to insult anybody. I'm just saying if you don't know what you're doing, don't seek this stuff out. You need to be educated. You need to be prepared for what may come down the pipe.
right.
And a lot of cases that have come to me through the years were either by other investigators or maybe a client that someone was working with said, I brought these people in to help me out and they got scared and they ran out of here.
Yeah.
They gathered up their equipment and they couldn't get out the door fast enough. So I was fortunate that I had Ed and Lorraine Warren to mentor me,
Right.
as well as some other my colleagues. Some of them are still in the work, but a lot of people have either passed away or they're long gone. I haven't seen some of these people in 30, 35 years.
Yeah.
But I'm always very apprehensive. People ask me today, well, aren't you scared? I'm like, well, I'm not scared per se, but I'm respectful of the power that these things possess.
Right.
You
Yep.
always want to treat spirits with respect, as you know, Tom.
Right.
You don't want to come in like gangbusters with, come on, if you're so
Doors.
bad, pick me up and throw me across the room.
Right. Yeah.
No, you don't want to be disrespectful
That's
like that.
that's that's
You
TV.
know,
So
I don't call myself a ghost hunter. I call myself a ghost helper.
yeah.
You know, I like the term paranormal researcher rather than paranormal investigator because
Right.
the investigation part is part of the research.
Right.
It's just a play on words, but some of these terms like demon and exorcism and all this stuff, it's kind of thrown around out there in the community today like it's nothing.
Right.
And you want to ask people, look, do you really know what an exorcism entails?
Yeah.
Uh, you know, you perform an exorcism on someone that doesn't need it, you can cause some serious psychological issues.
Well, and
You could turn a bad situation into a much worse situation, out of the frying pan into the fire kind of thing.
right.
So, getting back to what I was saying about educating, I'm still educating myself.
Hmm.
Like I said, I don't know everything. Every day is a learning experience for me. Every case, albeit maybe similar to other cases, but they're all different.
Yeah.
You have cases where maybe you might have a haunted house, you
Hmm.
might have a haunted object, or you might have a person that's haunted. That's why people say, well, how come this family's lived here for 30 years after this happened and nothing's ever happened to them? Well, that's because it wasn't meant for them.
Right. Yeah.
There's many reasons, and there are questions that we'll never answer in this lifetime. Maybe someday when we
Hmm.
go on to a bigger and better place, we'll have those answers. But we get the answers come in God's time, not in our time. Depending on
Right.
your faith. Which
Yeah.
is a word that I often use, because when you do this work, your true weapon is your faith.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah. Absolutely.
I do
Absolutely. Yeah.
promote people to use religious blessed objects as protection, but unless
Mhm.
you have the faith and the belief in the protection that provides you, and the power that these
Right.
things have, whether it be a Bible, holy water, a crucifix,
Hmm.
rosary beads, those are just inanimate objects, and the power comes from the faith behind it.
Right.
And that's
Yep.
that's something that you have to search deep down in your soul for. You can't really be taught that.
Right.
I was born and raised Roman Catholic. I was dragged kicking and screaming to church every week by my mom.
Yep.
Um, and the Warrens were very Roman Catholic, so I was taught in that way. Even though I've worked through the years with people of different faiths, many different faiths, and I've worked with people with no faith.
Right.
But when things start happening that people can't explain and they're terrified, they kind of get religion real quick. Like,
They
well,
find
what should I
something.
do? Should
They
I
find
go out and buy a rosary beads and get some holy water? I'm like, well, unless you have the faith in this stuff,
something for
it's
you.
not going to
Yeah.
help you.
Right.
So
Yeah.
the society, my hope is to be a big resource for not only helping people with, a paranormal issue if they have one,
Right.
but it's to educate them, so you can empower them. I
Hmm.
said, this isn't, Ghostbusters. This isn't Hollywood. I'm not going to show up with a proton pack on my back and,
Right.
suck these things up and lock them into the ecto chamber. I said, that's
Yeah.
Hollywood's version of this. I said, and that's,
Yep.
that's good. That's for entertainment. What we do is seek to find the truth, um, to educate. Again, like I keep using that word, you can't have enough education when it comes to this kind of stuff. And
Right.
I'm always learning. I ask questions. One question may lead to 10 more questions,
Yep.
and, like I do a lot of, like our conversation tonight. You blink and an hour or 2 hours goes by because you get so involved in things and you ask a question. Like you asked me, tell me a little about your history. Here I am 15 minutes later, spinning off on this tangent. But this has been my life, for the
Yeah.
last 40 years. And I'm still around to tell the tales. It hasn't been an
Yeah.
easy life. I'm not a rich man.
Yeah.
I'm not very well known, but that's okay.
Yeah.
I tell people I have a face for radio. I don't like, I've turned down television shows. I don't want to be on TV necessarily, unless it's at the capacity of education. I'm not
Yeah.
out there for fame and fortune. You can ask my wife how rich I've gotten off of doing this. You know, Money is not my God, and it shouldn't be
Right.
anybody's God. I'm driven, this
Right.
is a vocation, not an occupation. I'm
Yeah.
driven by the fact that maybe something that I know that I was taught or learned through my 40 years of doing this, I can help bring some peace to someone or their family. I can't tell you how
Yeah.
many times I've gotten a phone call and say, Joe, I don't know what you did, but I haven't been able to sleep this well in months, years even.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I didn't do it. All I did was lend a shoulder to lean on. Lend it a
Yeah.
friendly ear to tell me what's going on. Tell me, everyone has
Yeah.
a story. What's going
Hmm.
on? And let's try to figure this out together. It's more about empowering someone to help themselves. You know.
Hmm.
Um, so I'm sorry I got off on a tangent there, Tom, but
That's all right. Look at you,
it's been a
man.
very gratifying and rewarding life.
Yeah.
I've cried with people. I've laughed with people. I've stood shoulder to shoulder with good friends and colleagues like yourself, like Bill and Asia, Father Ken, Father Bob. The list goes on and on. Um, but I could not do it without all of you. This isn't about Joe
Yeah.
Franke. This is about all
Yeah.
of us.
So I
And the
want.
Warren Society is a very small group of people that
Mhm.
were basically handpicked by Bill and myself, because they're people that we trust and believe in. You know, it's like when
Right.
you go to battle, and you know what I'm talking about there. You you're putting your life
I may have,
in the
I may know
hands of
something
your
about
buddy
that.
next to you, and he's putting his in yours. You
Yeah.
know, and
Yeah.
it's such a great feeling to know that you've got this love and support for each
Yeah.
other, and
Yeah.
I couldn't do it alone. I wouldn't do it alone.
Yeah.
You know, if I didn't have the love and support of all you folks, I wouldn't be doing this. You know,
Yeah.
this is just
Absolutely.
my way of honoring my mentors by keeping their work alive.
Yeah. Yeah. So a couple of questions have come in.
Did I lose you?
Um, what's that?
You're frozen, Tom. I'm not even sure if you guys can hear me.
I can hear you. Am I back? Are you back?
Oh, wait a minute. See if you.
Hold on. So I can hear him and see him. Can everybody
I don't
else?
know if you're having storms out that way or something. Put my
Hold
glasses
on a
on. Maybe I
second.
see something there.
Um, hold on. I got to ask a question really quick.
Tom, did I lose you? I can't hear you. I can
So
see you, but you're
you can see him.
frozen.
Okay. I think he may have to restart. So give me 1 second to let Joe know that he may need to restart. Um,
Not sure. It's
let
not
me
on
send
my
him.
end.
Let me send him a quick message
I'm
really
not sure if
quick.
everyone could see or hear me. I'm kind of rambling here.
Give me a second, Joe. Oops. So I got to send him. There he goes. So Joe jumped off. I could hear him perfectly fine too, but I think when he went away and came back in, I think he, um, I think he may have had a disconnect somewhere. So he's going through the heat that we had here in the Midwest a couple days ago. He said his heat index is about 108 right now. Our heat index got up to about 110, 115. So when he got disconnected, he's using his phone too. So when he jumped off and when we lost him and he came back on, it may simply be he lost sound connection or whatever. So I'm hoping he logs out and logs back in, and I will keep an eye out for him to bring him back in. Um, but in the meantime, just so people know, he's talking about the Warren Society, and I have that listed down below. So what you see down below, for people who are not on the phone, who can actually see the scrolling marquee, there's Joe Franke. Yes, Nikki, we are breaking shit together. Absolutely. Joe Franke, his Facebook page. And then I also have his the Warren Society page listing down there as well. Can you hear me again,
I
Joe? You
got you. I
good?
was rambling. I don't know how much
Okay.
you heard.
So this is what's going on. We heard you
Okay.
perfectly. Um, so there was an instant about 10-15 minutes ago that you blinked out for like maybe 15 seconds, and then you came back in. That's when you started talking about Father Ken, Father Bob being part of the team
Yeah.
and everything else. You came back in and you continued to talk, and we heard you perfectly.
Okay. I
Um,
was
but so everybody heard you, and everybody was able to hear me. You just lost it on our side, which is why I told you to restart.
okay. Yeah.
So I think that's why we're good now, because everybody heard everything you said. Because what I was going to say is there's a couple of questions that
Yeah.
have come in, and so I kind of want to start with those. But I also want to let people know, because I'm excited about this. You're talking about the Warren Society for Paranormal Education and Research, and for people who do not know, I am actually one of those that were picked to be on that team. So I'm very excited and blessed and honored to
And
be
we're
part of
honored to
that.
have you.
Fantastic. So I very much appreciate that. But the other ones you're talking about, Father Joe, Father Bob, Father Ken, everyone else, is fantastic, because I've been doing this for 3 years. Again, I'm a newbie at this, but the abilities hit me like I was drinking from a fire hose, like a lot of people know, and they're still growing. I'm still learning new things. And when you talked about that, when you talked about how you're not an expert in anything, I always tell people that I am always a practicing intuitive. I will never be an expert
Mm.
in anything. I will always be a practicing intuitive, because that's that's what I am. I'm never going to know everything. I'm always going to be
Right.
practicing. So that's how I identify myself. And Bill shows up and says, "See what happens when you get the old guy on technology." So there's the other old guy talking about technology. So
Yeah.
but I'm going to go back and hit on a couple of the questions. The first one comes from, I call her my sister. Her name is Zhang, and she's from
Oh.
Indonesia. So when you hear me do the time zones in the
Mm.
beginning, when I do my
Yep.
entry, when I do my entry part, this is why, because I know I have people that watch me from all over. So I actually cover a lot of the time zones where I know people are watching from. And Zhang is the one who watches from
That's
Indonesia.
cool.
So she asks, have you ever witnessed or experienced any paranormal incidents at Lorraine's museum?
Yes. Yes, actually, I got a good story for you if you got time.
Absolutely. It's your
So
show. It's your show. I'm
no,
just running it.
no. Thank you for the question. But Laurel and I, it was I want to say it was no, it was probably the first couple of times we were in the museum. But I remember Ed wouldn't take us down there if it was after 9 o'clock at night. He goes,
Mm.
sometimes he says after 9 o'clock at night, he said if he doesn't feel safe, he doesn't even go in there. But there was one time Lorraine stayed upstairs. She didn't like going into the museum. She didn't like going in there at all, actually. Uh, so Lorraine was up in the kitchen and Ed's like, come on, kids, let me go down. Let's go. I'll show you some things in the museum. So we go down there and we're standing there and he's talking to us, and all of a sudden Lorraine yells down from upstairs that she needed Ed for something. So he looks at me, Laurel and I, and he says, "I'll be right back. Don't touch anything." Okay. So here I am, like I said. Remember I said the goosebumps on top of goosebumps.
Yep.
So I'm like shoving my hands in my pocket, and we're standing there shoulder to shoulder. And you remember there was a magazine? I don't think it's still out. It's called Fate magazine. Remember
Oh yeah,
that? I
yeah.
don't know. Is that still in print? You'd think I'd know.
Not
I have
anymore.
some
No.
timers, you know. But he had these Fate magazine in plastic sleeves, and they were
Mm-hmm.
pinned along the wood beam in the museum. There's beams that go across, and so Laura and I are standing there, just looking around, talking amongst ourselves, and all of a sudden she nudges me and she goes, "Look." And I look up, and the magazines in the sleeves all started swaying back and forth. And it wasn't just
Yeah.
one or two, it was like all of them. I think there must have been a dozen of them. I don't remember how many. And I'm looking at them and I'm like, okay, there's no wind,
Mm-hmm.
there's no open windows, but they started out slowly and they started moving like this, and then they started going like this. So Ed comes back and he looks up, he goes, "All right, we got to get out of here." And he was dead serious. He's like, activity started to pick up. And he said, "That's what I mean." He goes between the hours of 9 p.m. and 6 a.m. and he called the psychic hours, with 3 o'clock in the morning, being like, the pinnacle of that.
Yeah. The peak of
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
And I remember that very vividly because, I mean, what other reason? These things, they started very slowly, and Laura was freaking out. And I mean, I was right behind her. I'm like, "What's going on?" Ed's like, "Yes, sometimes that happens." He says, the energy will build up, and then something will happen. Sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
like the dinosaur, there's a purple dinosaur from the Devil Made Me Do It case, which was I think the Conjuring 3 movie was based on that. And he said that thing would talk, like a voice would come out of it. And
Right.
there's no batteries in it. Weird stuff like that. I mean, I've had things like that happen in my own house, years ago,
Yeah.
where items like the children's toys would go off, and I would purposely remove the batteries and they would still go off. Like, yeah, I
Yeah.
remember he had a fire truck and the lights and the siren and everything would go off and there was no batteries in it, you know?
Yeah.
So that was my first encounter with anything paranormal. I mean, what does the word paranormal mean? That which is above and beyond scientific explanation,
Right.
right? Well, there was no viable explanation for why these things just
Right.
started swinging like that. Um,
Yeah.
so that one kind of freaked me out. I mean,
Yeah.
like I said, I was 18, maybe 19 at the time. I didn't know my ass from my elbow. I still don't
Right.
know much more, but like I said, I'm still learning. But yeah, that happened. And if
Yeah.
Laura was here, she'd tell you the same story. I was just looking around and she nudged me. She's like, "Look." I'm like, yeah, unless Egg's got some fishing line hooked up to those trying to scare us, which obviously
Right.
he
Yeah.
didn't.
That's
So yeah, that that
right.
that that was my first encounter with something really strange in the museum.
Museum. Um,
Wait a minute, what is
Rosie.
it?
Rosie is asking. So I'm going to ask the question: why did they take Annabelle out on tour, and is she still possessed?
Well, it's a good question. From what I know from the family, that the town where the Warrens' home is located, it's literally at the end of a cul-de-sac. And they
Hmm.
used to have events at the home where they could bring people in and they'd get to meet Lorraine and should talk to them. And I remember Tony used to show some videos and things. And you have a bunch of people, maybe 50 people, sometimes more, crammed into the living room. And then what you do is take them down for a tour of the museum. Well, what happened was after years of doing this, the neighbors used to I guess, got upset. And I hope I'm getting the story right, but um, you'd have a ton of cars parked haphazardly every which way on this dead end road. Well,
Right.
now look, if I lived next door or across the street, I probably would have had enough of it too. But it really could have turned into a safety issue. So if emergency crews
Hmm.
had to get in there for some reason, and you get all these cars blocking people's driveways, and people come home from a hard day of work on a Friday and can't park their car in front of your house. So I guess
Can't
from
get
what
in
I
your
understand, that the
garage. Yeah.
town came down on them and said you can't do this anymore. You can't hold these events there. So I guess Tony had the idea of, look, well, if we can't bring people to the museum to see the artifacts and hear the stories, well, we'll bring some of the artifacts to the people.
Right.
So I think within the last couple of years, they started doing these road shows, I guess, for lack of a better term, and they would bring
Right.
some of the artifacts, including the animal doll, to these locations. And of course, that's Father Bob. One of his major duties is to make sure that everyone's protected and say the proper prayers and keep Annabelle on a leash, so to speak. Um,
Right.
but I don't know. I haven't seen the doll myself since Lorraine passed away. It's been quite a few years. I don't know if there's anything attached to the doll, but I can tell you a lot of the recognition that people give it,
Hmm.
their energy. Yeah,
Hmm.
of course you can manifest something.
Right.
I don't know for sure because, like I said, I've held the doll a few times in Ed's presence way back in the day. I didn't get any vibe or feeling off of it, but as Lorraine once put it, she's like, "Well, you really would have to you'd have to conjure." Like you're using a
Right.
Ouija board or another form of divination where you're actually conjuring things. If you got the doll and you're using a Ouija board, and yeah, of course, it's playing Russian roulette.
Right.
Why
Yeah.
would you do that? That's stupid.
Right. Right.
So the attachments come from us. People that
Hmm.
are conjuring. See, in my religious beliefs, is God would not allow a human spirit to inhabit in a doll, you know.
Right.
So the stories that I've heard of the doll, and I believe them to be true. However, when the Annabelle doll case happened, I think I was 2 years old. I think it was 1970. But that doll, according to what my mentors told me, was witnessed walking, standing. Now, the
Hmm.
doll itself, it's a Raggedy Ann doll. Those things can't
Yes, it
stand
does.
up,
Right.
but the recognition or the intentions that the nurses that own the doll would put into it, they would sit it at the table when they had dinner or breakfast. They would buy dresses for it and jewelry. They gave it a name.
Right.
I guess they had a friend at work, another nurse where they worked with, that was a medium that would do seances. Bad idea. And
Yeah.
they would sit around the table with the doll there, and they would conduct seances, and they would basically conjure,
Yeah.
and that's never a good thing. I mean,
Right.
I would say I have a lot of friends that are gifted mediums and psychics like yourself, but if you get a message from the other side, a message that we're not meant to know, but if you get a message, I call that a miracle. That's a gift.
Right.
But when
Yeah.
you're whipping out Ouija boards and tarot cards, and you're not schooled on how to use them properly, and you're not properly protected and not properly grounded, you know, that's what we call, conjuring. Now you're looking for information, like, oh, give me Friday night's lotto numbers. It doesn't work. It doesn't
Right.
work that way, you
Right.
know.
Yeah.
But if you're starting to conjure and you're like, well, I want to talk to my deceased grandparent or deceased parent or whatever, I can almost assure you that if something comes through, it's not going to be that deceased loved one coming through. It's going to be
Right.
something more dark and probably more sinister. So they would
Right.
hold these seances and give all this recognition to this doll. And of course, they something took over that doll. Now, a human spirit can manipulate the doll. It could knock it over. It could
Correct.
probably pick it up and move it. But it couldn't do what this doll did. It
Right.
couldn't attack somebody.
Right.
Things like that.
Yeah.
So it's all about free will and intention. Because we all have free will. That's something that God gave us. That's a gift that God gave every one of us, and even He doesn't intervene in that.
Right.
He allows us free will to do as we wish.
Right.
Of course, He always wants us to choose Him.
Right.
But if you look around, what's going on in the world today, most people, it looks like they choose the other
Mm.
sob. Um, but intentions. So, what are your intentions? If you're whipping out a Ouija board, well, what are your intentions? Well, I assume that you want to be a necromancer. You want to try to summon, the spirit of a once living person. Well, I can tell you, I've never really seen where that person would come through. It may be something more sinister that disguises itself as that person.
Right.
These negative entities, the demonic entities, they have the knowledge, wisdom of the ages. They know everything about you. They know all your sins,
Mhm.
all your shortcomings. I mean, they know everything. They have strength beyond human comprehension. You know, uh, they could pick me up and throw me across the room like I'm a rag doll.
Yeah.
A human spirit can't do that.
Right.
But I firmly believe, and it's my faith that tells me this. God would not allow a human spirit to inhabit a doll.
Hmm.
So you see these movies like Chucky, Child's Play, and stuff like
Right.
that. It's all for horror, entertainment, whatever.
Right. Right. That's
But
that's that's Hollywood. So yeah.
it's Hollywood, and
Right.
my theme this year, Asia and I have been working on this. My theme this year, I mix things up every year, is it's going to be like based on a true story.
Mm.
And when I say air quotes,
Right.
very loosely based. So Hollywood versus reality.
Hmm.
So when we talk about the Amityville case, okay, well, here's the reality of what this family went through and
Right.
fled and left everything behind after 28 days.
Right.
Okay. And this is Hollywood's version.
Hmm.
And I get it. I mean, I get it to a point, but in many of the cases that I've talked about, we may even discuss tonight, if you just told the real story of what really happened, it's far more terrifying.
That's exactly what. So I
Far
had
more terrifying.
Andrea Perrin on a while
Mhm.
ago, and she said the same thing. She said they could not put some of the real world stuff that happened in the movie because it was too
Yeah.
scary.
Over
It
the top.
Yeah, yeah. And so she's like, "There's, it's just not something that they could do." So they had to modify it to where the audience can actually go to the movie because the realistic what happened to her when she was a child was too scary that they couldn't handle it and they couldn't comprehend it.
Yeah.
It was like so far out that they just the human brain just wouldn't comprehend it because it's never happened to them. It only happened to her and her family.
Right.
So
Right. And then, yeah, what happened to Andrea and her family was terrifying.
hmm
but then now you fast forward to today, and the house is a beautiful house. You know,
Right.
I was there many times years ago when Norma Sutcliffe owned it many years before the movie came out.
Right.
And Norma would tell me, she's like, "Yeah, we got weird things, weird noises, but it's an old house, like 300 years old. I mean, it's an old house, but," he says, "there's nothing going on here."
Yeah.
But then the stories start.
Hmm.
Poor Bathsheba Sherman, that poor woman, from what I understand, all the research I've done, she was a pillar in the community. She was beloved by everyone.
Yeah.
But somebody had to be the scapegoat. So they came
Yeah.
up, somebody concocted this whole story that she was a witch and she would eat your children. And, I'm like, whoa. It's like,
Yeah.
and then the stories, and that's all they are. They're just
That's
stories.
sports. Yeah.
And now you're trying to, the lines were blurred, they're erased, between what's real and what's not real.
Right.
And everyone, it's like, you ever tell somebody a story, it goes around the room, it goes through 10 people and it comes back to you,
Telephone game.
and you're like,
Yeah.
that's not what happened. Everybody puts their own flavorings on it and their own spin on it.
Yeah.
And but it happens all the time.
Yeah.
It's like, well, that's not completely accurate, but after it
Well,
goes through a number of people, the story gets changed.
and then there's the ones that don't exist at all because, like, you had The Conjuring, fantastic movie. I mean, as far as I know. But then you had, like, The Conjuring 2, The Conjuring 3, and you did the
Yeah.
same thing with Annabelle, Annabelle 2, Annabelle 3, Annabelle 4, and they're not tied anymore to the actual what happened. They're
Right.
just building new parts of it to keep the story going, but it has nothing to do with the original that actually happened at all.
They're not rooted in reality
Right.
at all.
Yeah.
And it's sad. And I get Hollywood. What's the ultimate goal is to make money. Put butts in the seats, sell tickets,
Right.
make money.
Yep.
I get it, but that's where I have a personal issue with things, because that's not why I'm in this work.
Right.
You know, the payment that I get and that we all get, I should say, is far more gratifying than money.
Right. Yeah.
To be able to look into somebody's eyes and they're shedding tears of joy, which you once were tears of fear,
Fear. Yeah. Exactly.
and confusion. Is like, what is happening? I
Yeah.
don't know what's happening. I don't know why this is happening. I don't know why I'm hearing voices and hearing growling sounds and, smelling foul stenches and things
Right.
like that. And it's all about, okay, let's find out what's going on here. Let's try to educate ourselves so we can educate them. But that's not what it's turned into these days. Social media is,
It's a very quick hit. Look what I did. There's my 15 minutes of fame,
yeah.
and then moving on. But
I mean,
it's
there's so many people that want to help people,
yeah.
but you need to be able to help yourself first. You need to be educated, because all you're going to do is you're putting yourself in a line of fire, and now you could become a victim. Now you can get an attachment, bring that home to your friends and family.
Right.
And nobody wants that. Just for what? To be a thrill seeker?
Yeah.
To try to capture a video or an audio clip or something and post it all over your social media and
Right.
say, "Hey, look at me, look what I caught."
Yeah. Look what I did. Yeah.
It's like, oh, okay. I mean, but what have you done to help the spirit, or what have you done to help the family or the
Right.
person that you're trying to help?
Right.
That's what it's all about.
And that's why I don't like people who go in with the intention to intimidate or to be aggressive, because that's not helping anything at all in any way, shape, or form.
No, it makes you look like a fool, to be
Yeah.
honest with you.
Yeah.
I mean, I know we've all seen the videos. Come on, if this is the gates of hell, why don't you rise up and get me? I'm like, oh
Right.
my God.
Right.
You understand what you just did? You just
That's what
opened
you're
the
asking
door.
for. Right. Yeah.
You just opened the doorway of your own free will.
Yeah.
And these things that are listening, and they hear you clearly.
Oh yeah.
But they don't say, he's just joking. He's filming a TV show. Or it's like, no, God forgive them. They know not what they do.
Right. Exactly.
And,
Yeah.
but people like me, I'm a dinosaur now.
Yeah.
All right. People like me, sometimes I'm just a big pain in the ass. Joe, yeah, he's a killjoy. And I'm over there screaming like, don't do that. Don't do that.
Right.
You can potentially become a victim yourself.
Right. Yeah.
And it frustrates me, because all I want to do is help people.
Right.
But there's most of the people don't need my kind of help. They might need, physical or psychiatric care.
Right. Yeah.
They may have some form of trauma. They might have a generational curse. They
Mhm.
might have an addiction. It might be drugs. It might be alcohol. It might be pornography. And I
Right.
don't say that to be funny, but pornography for some people is an addiction.
Right.
Anything that is an addiction is, in my religious beliefs, is it's against the first commandment. You're putting something more important in front of God.
In front of God. Right. Yeah.
Whether it be power, love, money,
Mhm.
whatever it can be, anything you put before God is an abomination to Him.
Mhm.
And that's what the message I try to teach.
Right.
And a lot of people ask me some tough questions, and I'll say, you know what, that's a good question. I don't know the answer to it.
Yeah.
And I'm not embarrassed to admit it, because I don't know everything, and maybe it's a question that'll be answered someday after I pass.
Right.
I ask a question when I lecture. I say, how many people here, if given the opportunity, would like to know the date, the time, and the manner of their own death?
Yeah.
I don't see too many hands.
A whole lot of hands. Yeah.
I mean, once in a while, yeah, I wouldn't mind. I'm like, yeah, really, with my luck, I'd be getting hit by a bus when I leave here tonight, but
Yeah.
it's like, no, and you know why? And again, I keep saying in my beliefs, because I don't want to push my beliefs on anybody.
Right.
But I believe that that kind of information is only known to God.
Mhm.
He knows our future, but He allows us through our own free will to make that path,
Right.
to forge our own futures.
Yeah.
Of course, He knows what's going to happen, because He knows everything.
Yeah.
But we sometimes, you got to crawl before you can walk. Sometimes you got to make mistakes. Sometimes you got to fall off a roof and get banged up and be like, oh, why would God let that happen? Well, because He's teaching me a lesson.
Right.
Maybe that was meant to happen for some reason, and we don't understand it, and we may never understand it. But things happen for a reason. I firmly believe that.
And that's a big one that I talked when people ask me some questions. I'm like, look, because they ask me about your angels and stuff like that, and I'm like, that's why angels can't just instantly step in and help every single time, because you have your free will, but
Right.
your angels are there to help you if you ask. If you need them, they will step in
Right.
and help, but they're not going to step in on their own, on their own power, because you have your free will. It is your choice if you're going to ask them for help or not. Now, sometimes there's divine intervention that happens,
Mhm.
and that's normally a life-saving event because it's not your time to go. But for the most part, you have to ask, because they're not just going to step in and go, oh, he needs my help or she needs my help. They don't know that.
Yeah.
They don't make those assumptions. You have to make that decision yourself. And
Exactly.
I have to explain that to people, because a lot of people are like, well, how come they let this happen? Well, because you didn't ask for help.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of talk about that as well that I have with people, and it's really interesting how some people don't recognize how free will is,
Yeah.
and that's some of the stuff they have to understand.
Right.
Nikki had a question, and it kind of ties to when you were investigating, either with the Warrens or other locations by yourself, with other teams or whatever else.
Hmm.
And she's asking, is there a location that you will never go back to?
No,
No? Yeah.
I don't. I mean, the quick answer is no. I mean, but there are some locations that you shouldn't have to, or because you don't want to stir a hornet's nest.
Right. Yeah.
If things are quiet, if you've done good work there and everything's okay, there's no reason to go back there.
Right.
But I wouldn't be, yeah, if the question's being asked from the standpoint of like, would you be too afraid to go back there? No.
No. Yeah.
No, I mean, I always say that, one of my taglines is I say, faith and fear cannot coexist.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is, if you are deeply rooted in your faith and it's unshakable, what do you have to fear? Turn
Yeah.
around, look in your corner, and see who's there.
Yeah. Yeah.
But no, I mean, there's places that I'd love to go to. I've got a bucket list.
Oh yeah.
There's places I like to go to, like Alcatraz. We talked about that last
Yep.
night.
Yeah.
The Winchester House, which hopefully, I'll have time with Father Ken and Father Bob when I'm out in California in a couple of months. That I would love to see these places just to
Yeah,
feel the energy,
feel the energy. Yeah,
and just to experience it.
and
I'm
that's
not going to go there like a big tough guy and say, "All right, come on, a D block and kick my butt."
right. But
No, no.
that was something that Nikki and I talked about because you and I did talk last night, and she was listening in, and I talked about because I'm from the West Coast, I'm from California, so I've been to both those locations before I had my abilities, and I
Mhm.
felt like the depression there, the heaviness, and everything else.
Yeah.
So, and she goes, it would be really interesting for you to go back, like me, to go back now that I have my abilities and I understand what's going on. So it'll be really interesting if you guys get the chance to go there, how your intake is of it, because, like I said, it was heavy for me when I was there, and
Yeah.
I was just a dumb young kid, and I was like, man, this place is kind of depressing. It feels kind of heavy, and you leave and you're
Mhm.
kind of like very melancholy, and you're kind of like, well, now I have to go to like Ripley's Believe It or Not museum so I can get some fun stuff going on,
Right, right.
you know.
Well, I mean, it's true though. It's like let's go back to the Conjuring House for example, because it's a good example. It's like you go there, it's a beautiful old home, it's steeped in history, but if there's anything there now that would be considered evil, it's what people bring in.
Yeah,
It's what people bring in. You bring all this negative attention, but why? For what reason?
yeah,
And that's where it's important when you're investigating a private residence, because I do private investigations. I mean, public investigations, I'll do them for fun or to raise money for charity or something like that. But you can't do a public investigation with 50 people in
right,
tow,
right,
you know.
yeah,
But you go in there and you gotta know how to protect yourself. You gotta know what questions to ask, and you be respectful about it.
right,
You don't want to go in there like, you see all these, people on, and they stand there with their arms full. They're like, oh, I'm a big tough guy. Like, it doesn't matter.
right.
Physical size and strength
It means
means nothing.
nothing.
It
Yeah,
means nothing. I don't care how big and bad you are. It doesn't matter.
yeah,
You need to be strong emotionally, psychologically,
yeah,
and spiritually.
yeah,
Okay, physical strength, yeah, it could come in handy if you got to move a sofa, you
right.
know. But
I have
it's
to knock
just,
you down so I get out of the room first. Yeah, the physical's gonna
I
count.
mean, and I get it. A lot of these folks, they do it for ratings, they do it for views and likes, and they do it for the camera. But what are you going to do if you really are faced with something diabolical?
Yeah,
Are you prepared? No, and I can almost say in every situation, those kind of people are not going to be prepared,
yeah,
and they're going to end up, running from the place. So it's like, Bill and I have had these conversations. I'm like, I would love for somebody to come up with like a top 10 list of the scariest places around, whether it be in this country or find the scariest places that even the toughest tough guy investigators wouldn't want to go in.
oh yeah,
And I'll go in,
right,
strap me with cameras, and I'll go in. I'll probably sit down and fall asleep
yeah,
because I'm not going to go in there and start disrespecting
right. You're not
whatever spirits may or may not be there.
yeah, you're not antagonizing anything. You're just
No,
going
you don't want to do that because it's disrespectful,
right,
But you see these videos on YouTube, and you know, you're 10 minutes into the video, and all of a sudden they've got more evidence than I've captured in 10 years.
right. Yeah,
Now I don't know if it's real or fake. I'm not accusing anything, but it just doesn't happen that way.
yeah,
Spirits come on their time. Ed taught me that. He's like, they don't come on your time; they come on their time.
right,
And the negative spirits, he said, they're going to wait until you're at your lowest moment, your most vulnerable moment, your weakest point. Okay. And that's when they will strike.
right,
Okay. That's when they're going to strike when you're least expecting it. Or they may not come after you, but they'll attack those that you love so
right,
dear. They'll
right,
go after your spouse, your child, your children,
right.
because they can.
Yeah. So
So people need to be careful. They need to be careful.
I'll share with you really quick. One thing that
Nobody's
happened to
mentioning.
Nikki and I on an investigation is we kind of had that happen. We run an investigation, and we had basically something distracted us over here, and had one of our, and basically scared one of the people that was with us. But then
Hmm.
something jumped into another person when we turned our back to help this person. Another person got jumped. So
Really?
all of a sudden we had to turn back to her, and that was very, very interesting because it was very threatening, um, and it was it was very interesting to deal with because the person who jumped up and like he's like, I got to get out of here, I got to get out of here, I'm being attacked.
Mm.
And at the same time we turned away from one of our mediums, and she was already kind of down and tired and everything else, and all of a sudden next thing you know she's jumped and something's threatening us, and so we had to
Yeah.
turn back to her to help pull that out of her and then remove it from her to get her back to where she was, and then kind of reset everything. And that
Yeah.
was something that Nikki and I went on that was one of our investigations, and that was one of our first investigations. So that was very intimidating to have to understand. I mean, the people we're with have been doing investigations for a while, but Nikki and I were new.
Mhm.
Turns out I was the one who knew what to do, but I think it's because it's instinct for me.
Yeah.
It's just how I'm built. Um, and it just came very second nature. But we ended up
Right.
resolving the issue. But it does use tactics like that to like, hey, look over
Yeah.
here, bam. It has that ability to do that, and it totally takes you off your game if you're not ready for
Mhm.
it. I mean, you really, if you're doing it correctly and respectfully, you should never have to deal with something like that. But sometimes things just go sideways, so you always have to be on your game. Uh,
Exactly. And if you don't have proper training, you're not going to know what to do.
right,
That's what I said. It's you need to be educated, educate yourself. People say, "Well, Joe, how do I get education?" I was fortunate. Like I
right,
said, I have a very unique history.
yeah,
No one has lived the life that Joe Franke has. People have had similar paths.
hmm,
Well, I get it all the time. They're like, "Oh, what was it like to work with the Warrens?" God, I never got to meet them. I'm like, they were wonderful people.
right,
I hear a lot of hate out there
right,
today. I hear these negative comments, and it hurts my heart. It
yeah,
really does.
yeah,
I said, I can speak intelligently to the character of the people that I knew,
right,
and I knew them pretty intimately. But to hear like, where did you hear that? Oh, I read it on the internet, or my
right.
brother's sister's cousin's girlfriend's boyfriend's uncle
It's not
told
even
me the story.
yeah, it's not even secondhand. It's third hand information that
Yeah,
or something that someone assumed, but someone took as gospel. You know, and that's the
yeah.
worst part about it is you don't know. I mean, that's what I appreciate is because you're able to give us firsthand knowledge. Other people give us secondhand. I met them once, and here's my opinion of them. Great. Did you ever work with them? Did you hang out with them? Did you any of this? No. Then you have no clue. You're
Ed and Lorraine had many a dinner in this very house. I've been here 35 years. Laurel and I would go out to dinner with them. We ate dinner at their house. They would come here, and we would talk. And we wouldn't even talk about cases. We'd talk about our lives.
lives. Yeah. How the
I
kids do
remember we were talking
that.
about Laura. Laura was pregnant, and when she was pregnant with the girls, my twins,
Yeah.
we'd joke how big she was, and
Right.
we were competing. Like, Joe, you look pregnant too. I'm like, yeah, thanks a lot. I appreciate that.
Right.
But there's so much more to this work than just watching TV
Yeah.
or even reading a book. It's
Yeah.
like, but most people's claim to any sort of education, to even use that term, is watching television shows or watching YouTube
Right.
videos.
Right.
And it's not their fault. That's all they
That's
have.
what they
People
know.
ask me
Right.
all the
That's what
time,
they
I'm like,
know.
find someone in your area that may have more knowledge, that be willing to take you under their wing or let you
Right.
in their group and teach you. But you don't just it's stuff like this, you don't just throw them to the wolves.
Right.
Like I said, it was probably a couple of years before it said, hey, take Brian and Bill and I want you to go to this house and document, set up cameras, set up audio equipment. But before that, I was always with them under their guidance, under
Right.
their watchful eye, because, I didn't know what I was doing,
Still learning. Right.
and it was frustrating at times. It was very gratifying at times. People looking at you with tears in their eyes are like, tell me I'm not going crazy. I'm like, no, you're not going crazy.
Right.
Let's figure this out. But you got to know what kind of questions to ask too. It's
Right.
like, all right, well, how how long have you lived here? Well, we've lived here 20 years. Well, when did this alleged activity
When did
start?
it start?
Well, about 3 years ago. Okay, well, let's just stop here and move backwards. Let's go back 3 years ago. Was there an event
What?
in your life? Was there some kind of tragedy? Did someone pass away? Was, God forbid, a murder or a suicide?
Right.
Was there something psychologically that impacted this? Is anybody into black magic? Is there a generational curse? It could be any number of 1,000 things, and
Yeah.
the answer to one question may lead to a dozen more.
Right.
But you got to know what questions to ask in what particular order, so that you can, form an idea in your mind. Is like, all right, what's going on here? How did it start? Who's involved?
Hmm.
All right, you might have a family of five, and it might just be affecting one person. Well,
Yeah.
maybe that activity, that message, or whatever you call it, was meant for that person. You and I could be standing right next to each other.
Oh
And I'm
yeah.
like, I'll say, did you see that? And you're like, no, I didn't see it. Well, it was meant for me.
Yeah. Right.
It wasn't meant for anybody else. So these are questions that people very rarely, if ever, ask,
Yeah. Yeah.
and they go out there with all this equipment. And I said, you buy all this equipment, you're just making somebody else rich.
And you're making if you bring it into the home without any knowledge or the location, you're making them uncomfortable.
Mhm.
You're solidifying, saying yes, there's definitely something there, rather than doing the going in as a pure skeptic first and saying what else could it possibly be, anything else could possibly be besides paranormal.
Yeah.
Because I go in, because I work, because I also work under Bill Slevin for the Paranormal Existence Research Society.
God bless you.
And and luckily I pick up a lot on my own, but I've also picked up a lot from them and listening to them and being part of them and going on investigations and stuff like that, to where I am always a skeptic first. I never go in
Sure.
when you tell me you have something in your home paranormally. Okay, my job is to identify everything it could possibly be that is not paranormal before I say, okay, now we need to look at the paranormal side of things.
Right.
So, and for me, that's important for a lot of people to understand, because there's a lot of places, still written in English, people and places out there that they get a phone call because they're listed somewhere as paranormal investigation team that will come help your help your house, and they bring in 4 rolling cases of equipment in and start
Yeah.
setting stuff up and go, okay, let's figure out what's here.
And you
No,
don't need it.
no, and it's nice because again, the training that's passed down for people who know, I've learned to sit just simply with them and exactly what you're talking about. Ask questions, figure out the questions that
Yeah.
need to be asked, and then move on from there. Sometimes you'll sit with a person for 2-3 hours, and
Mhm.
all it is discussion, and then you get the understanding of what it is, and then you find out it's not paranormal. It's something totally different.
And very rarely is it paranormal.
It's paranormal, right?
I tell people, I said, look, you always want to look for a rational, natural explanation for
Correct.
something
Yep.
before you take the nuclear option and go to, and no, but that's what
It's
people do,
true.
because you know
It's true.
what? Deep down inside, they want it to be paranormal because they
Right.
think it's cool. I
Right.
mean, call up their friends and neighbors. I got a ghost in my
I got
house.
someone in my house. Yeah.
And one thing I love about Bill, and I give Bill a big shout out here, is Bill is Bill's a tech guy.
Right.
Bill is very educated on how this equipment works and what it's designed to do and whether it works or not.
Right.
I'm not a tech guy.
Yeah.
I'm a field warrior myself.
Yep.
I'm not a big. I mean, I know how to use a tape recorder and a camera and all that, but all this these this equipment that they make, it's really unproven. I mean, you get something that detects EMF. It's like, well, we emit EMF. I mean, we live on the planet Earth, which is one big magnet.
Yeah.
You need to do it, use it in a controlled environment. So, for example, if you are doing a physical investigation of a home, ask the homeowner, when you want to do some baseline readings, do you mind shutting the power off?
Right.
Pull the main. No,
Right.
you don't do it, or your team.
Right.
Let the
Right.
homeowner do
The
it.
homeowner do
So
it.
you
Yep.
do it for 20 minutes, half hour tops. You're not gonna defrost the freezer.
nope. Yep.
But
See what happens.
you want to get baseline readings, but use the equipment properly, and that's where Bill's a great educator because he knows how to use the equipment,
Right.
and he can teach people how to use it.
Yeah.
Where I'll be like, yeah, I think that's the on button. Just flip that on.
Yeah.
But
And
Bill's got tons of equipment. I tease him about it all the time. I'm like, I don't know. I love your cat balls.
it took us longer to set up the equipment at Orlando MegaCon than it is for Orlando MegaCon to actually run that day.
Yeah.
So
No, I mean it's
really,
all cool
it was
equipment, but if you don't know how to
everybody
use
wants to,
it,
right, and everybody wanted to put their hands, and I guess I'm one of the lucky ones because I'm kind of a hybrid between the two. I know how all the electronics work, but I'm also very old school to where I know how to just sit down and use a pen and paper and ask questions.
right?
So
That's me.
and that's I'm kind of a hybrid between those two. So it's nice that, but I get to learn from both sides. And like I said, I've been doing this for 3 years,
Hmm.
but I'm a very fast learner apparently. And
You are.
with the abilities that came into it all, when I learned I had abilities and how many came in, they instantly almost aligned to let me know what I needed to learn at a very rapid pace. Now, one thing that Nikki and I do, which is fantastic as well, when we go to investigate, we like to investigate with other teams because we like to
Hmm.
see their methods. Because sometimes we'll pick up stuff that we would have never thought of, or we'll be like, yeah, we're not doing that, but it allows us to work with different teams and just kind of get a feel for how different people do different things, and maybe even
And you ever walk away shaking your head like these people watch too much TV?
um, yeah, it wasn't a team that we investigated with, but it was a team that we used to follow. Like they would go to investigation first, and we'd follow them.
Yeah.
And then we met them a couple of times, and it was one of those teams where I walked in, and I have this very innate ability to instantly know if you're a good person or not. And I walked in, and I instantly would not even go towards them. I was like, nope, that's all
Good.
bad energy. I can't go near them. And the way they did investigations was antagonize every single time they went in and basically challenged everything. And then the bad part was, like, if we were a team that followed them afterwards, like the following weekend, well,
Yeah.
then everything was spun up, so it would come after us. And we're like, hold on, different team. That's not what we're here for. So, so that's kind of the things that we had to deal with as well. So Nikki makes a point, and this is it because you're talking about people want their home to have something, so they can say, hey, I have something in my home. This is unique. So she actually pointed out, well, we had people stop by our table at Mystic Fest that said they had a team who did an investigation. So the question was, did they actually want help, or did they just want some people in the house to investigate?
They just wanted validation,
Right.
probably.
Yeah, and
They
that's
wanted they wanted to be able to tell their friends, "Hey, I had Joe Franke or Tom Springer or Bill Sullivan came to my house, and you know,
yeah. They said
yeah, I've had that happen to me." I'm like, "Look, I thought you wanted my help. I'm not a dog and pony show
right.
here.
Yeah,
I thought you wanted my help. That's why I've done investigations where I've never even entered the house. I've just helped them over the phone, especially around COVID when we couldn't go.
we've
You
done that.
know,
We've done that online. We do some of them online.
yeah,
It's you can help them, and
what,
but it's just teaching them the proper ways to do things.
yeah,
If there is like just something as simple as saging your house, just to make it feel lighter and better, and but there's some things that you can give that person, and this goes back to what you're talking about in the very beginning,
yeah,
kind of started to where you are giving that person the power. You are
exactly,
you are introducing that person to
exactly.
understand that they have the power to take on what they feel is necessary. And if not, then that's why people like teams exist. But the whole point is to give them the ability to own their place, to own
Hmm.
their power to do all that wonderful stuff. So that's
Hmm.
so it's nice that there's teams out there that do that and they pay attention to it. So that's why I'm appreciative of
Hmm.
pretty much with both teams I'm put on with the Warren Society and with PERS. That's really the backbone behind it. Is we're here to help you.
Right.
And that's really what it comes down to for the most part.
You said that perfectly because I tell people, I said, look, I'm not going to show up with a proton pack on my back. I
Right,
said, what I will do though is I will help educate you. I will help empower you. I will guide you. I pray for guidance all the time.
right, yeah,
I mean, I will. I said, they're like, well, Joe, I need you to come over and get rid of it. I said, well, if there is something there, I'm not going to get rid of it.
Right.
You are.
I'll show you how.
This is your home. This is
Yeah.
your family. This is your business. This is
Yep.
your life. You need to dig in and take control.
Right.
I said, if it's something that is targeting you or your family, I said, calling someone like me, I'm just here to give you advice and to guide you and help you. I'm not going to come and whip out the proton pack. And
Right.
it just, it sounds silly and cartoonish, but that's what people want.
But I
And then if I tell them, some people, I'll tell them this, and they'll jump from team to team to team until they
right.
find somebody that will
That will
come
do
out and validate their
right.
story.
But the whole thing
I
with
won't
that,
do that.
for me, that big part is, you know what? You want me to take care of your problem,
Yeah.
but when I leave, it's still going to be your problem.
Yeah.
You have to understand how to get to deal with that problem. And it's funny how a lot of people misinterpret what's in their home. Sometimes it's loved ones
Yeah.
that's with them.
Sometimes it's a beautiful thing.
Right. And they're like, oh, and they're like, oh my God, I got something in my house and I'm scared. And then all of a sudden you help them realize what it is. And then you're like, then you give them the ultimate question. Do you want me to get rid of it? Or are you okay with it being here and you just kind of set boundaries?
Yeah.
Oh,
Or you get the type where like, well,
that was an option.
yeah, well, you get people say, well, don't get rid of it, and they actually get mad at you.
Right.
I'm
Yeah.
like, well, wait a minute, that's not the way this works. If a
Right.
spirit needs help
Right.
crossing over, okay, I am bound, it's my duty to help
To
that
help.
spirit.
To help.
Don't sit there and yell at me and say, I don't want you to get rid of it because, this is my haunted restaurant. This is my business. No, no,
Right.
no, no. If
Right.
this spirit needs help, we're
There's
gonna we're gonna help the
right.
spirit.
Right.
I don't care
Yeah.
about your business.
Yeah. So Rosie asked a question back about the museum.
Hmm.
And she said, have you had anything from an investigation that you added to the museum of Lorraine's? Have you ever brought it in and is there?
No, not me personally. I mean, I know that I've been on investigations with the Warrens where they had added to the museum, but not a case of mine. No,
Yeah, okay.
no, no. And I don't have a museum of my own. I do have some artifacts that are out in my shed. I
Hmm.
don't bring them in the house because Laura won't let me. But no, seriously, I have removed things from people's home and properly disposed of them,
Hmm.
so to speak.
Properly. Properly.
Um, well, I actually had a woman who had two Ouija boards, and I told her how to properly dispose of them, and she's like, "Well, can I just give them to you?" I said, "Well, do you have them?" She goes, "Oh no, they're at home." I said, "Well, I'll give you my address if you want to send them to me. I'll take care of it." But she never
Right.
did.
Yeah.
She never did. Somebody was like, "Oh, were you crazy? Don't send my."
Right.
I'm like, "Look, if you want my help, I'll tell you how I was taught to dispose of these things, but." One way, I know I jump around a lot, Tom. I forgive me,
I
but
don't care.
one way I can differentiate
It's
between
central.
people.
Come on.
One way I differentiate between whether people are serious or not is
Hmm.
I'll give them homework.
Yeah.
I'll say, well, before I'm even going to come out to the house, I need you to do X, Y, and Z.
Right.
And you would be amazed, or maybe you wouldn't be, but you'd be amazed at how many people don't
Don't
do
do it.
what you ask them to do.
Right.
I'm like, you called me looking for help. My time is valuable to me, but I'm here for you.
Right.
That's why I said this is a vocation. This is what I do.
Yeah.
But if you're not going to do what I ask you to do, I mean, it could be as simple as just go back 3 years and write up a brief bullet pointed timeline of
Right.
what happened, who was present, who, what, when, where, all that stuff. And 2 weeks go by, and you're like, "Did you do it yet?" "No, I haven't gotten around to it
Yeah.
yet." I'm like, well, how
Yeah.
serious are you? How scared are you?
Right.
You tell
Yeah.
me that the closet doors are slamming on you every night, and you're scared out of your mind, but
You're not that scared.
you're not
So,
doing anything to help yourself.
right. Yeah.
So I don't
And
take
you're not
those
gonna
people
and you're
seriously.
not gonna wait me out thinking that I'm just gonna go ahead and come help. No, I am trying to help you by having you do homework. But you're not gonna wait me out by saying, well, okay, you didn't do it, so I'm gonna come look at it anyways. No, that's not how this game plays.
It's
So,
very frustrating, and I know you and all your listeners out there are probably saying, "Yep, he's right." We tried to help these people. We asked them to do this, this, and this, and they didn't do it.
it's so
They
when
didn't do it.
So when Nikki and I just did Mystic Fest, and people would come by and they'd ask, because I told them we do home investigations. We try to help if they're we can do Zoom calls, whatever else. And I said, but you need to go out here and you need to go to the site, and we have a questionnaire for you to fill out. So it kind of gives us a background of what kind of help you may be looking for. And
Mm.
they're like, oh, I have to do a questionnaire. I'm like, yeah. They're like, nah, never mind. I'm like, well, then, yeah, you're not that serious about it.
Yeah.
So, it must not be that scary to you,
Yeah, people don't. I mean, they're all for you coming out and doing something for them, but they don't want to get their hands dirty.
Right,
It's like, wait a minute, you're gonna do the work. I'm just gonna support you. I'm gonna guide you. I'm gonna support you.
right,
But I don't. We don't charge a dime to help people.
right.
So if
Exactly.
I have to travel an hour, 2 hours out of my way, whether it be in my home state or somewhere else,
Right,
I'm willing to do that and I'm not asking for a dime.
right.
I'm
I'm
trying to help
trying to
you,
help you.
but
Yeah,
rest assured, I'm going to do my homework before I decide to spend my money.
right, right.
But if you're not going to do what I ask you to do, I just like, well, what do you want me to do?
Yeah, you must not be that serious about it. So,
You're not serious about it. You need to prove to me that you're serious about it and you got skin in the game.
yeah. Rosie is asking, when you dispose of Ouija's, are you just basically saying to burn them?
No, don't burn them ever.
Right.
You
I
burn a Ouija board, all you're doing, if there's an attachment to that board, is you're releasing that
You're
energy. It's
releasing
going
it
to look
out.
for another host.
Yep. You're just releasing it out into the world. Yep.
Ed taught me, he says, if to properly dispose of a Ouija board is take it out into a remote area, dig a hole at least a foot deep.
Yep.
All right. Consecrate the ground, bury the board. And then I always put a St. Benedict and a St. Michael medal,
Mm-hmm.
blessed metal. Because if it's not blessed, it's nothing but a piece of
Just a
metal.
piece of metal. Yep.
Put it on top, bury the board, and forget about it. Don't do it in your backyard. Try
Yeah.
to go out somewhere in a remote area. Don't do it in your neighbor's backyard either. He was telling you to come dig holes in my yard. No, but that's the way. 'Cause you don't want to burn. Believe me, before I knew this, years and years and years ago, I tried to burn a board, and I tried to burn it in a grill,
Hmm.
and I doused that entire thing with lighter fluid. And as God is my judge, that board would not burn.
Mm-hmm.
The lighter fluid burned, and the edges of the board, it's just cardboard.
Yep.
They were charred, but the board itself remained intact. And I remember calling Ed on the phone because this is a long time ago. Ed was still alive. He's like, "Oh no, Joe, no, don't burn it." And that's what he told me. He
Yeah.
instructed me what I just said: bury it, consecrate the ground, stuff
Yep.
like that. But you don't want to bury it in your backyard.
Right. Yeah.
So there's a proper way to dispose of things like that. Some people have, they'll take them home and create a museum. I opted not to do that. I do have some items, like I said, out in my shed,
Right.
but there might be only a dozen things out there. But I don't have a museum, so to speak, and I'm not looking to start one.
Right.
But I have to protect my family first. And I
Right.
mean, my kids are all adults, grown, and moved on. But my wife, she's not even happy about Hannibal being here.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
Bill,
Hannibal, not Annabelle.
not Annabelle, Hannibal. Yep. And it's funny too because Bill has issues when B tells him, "No, don't bring that in the house." So so
Well, I mean, why spin the wheel and take a chance?
yeah,
All right. At the end of the day, I'm just a mortal human being. I don't have a big S on the front of my shirt and a red cape on.
yeah, that's all
I'm
behind
a
you.
human being. Yeah, Superman, right?
That's all behind you. Yep.
It's like, but people with their egos and their narcissistic ways, like, oh, I'll kick the shit out of a demon. No, you
No, you
won't.
won't. Yeah.
Like, oh, I got pushed down the stairs by a demon. I'm like, no, it
No.
wasn't a demon. You probably tripped.
Right.
But all these people with their claims that they fought demons and stuff, I'm like, oh my God,
Right.
get over yourself already.
Yeah.
It's like you
And,
don't want that kind of attention.
and it's and I always I use something that Bill and I reference Bill a lot because Bill's taught me a lot of information already, but I always reference something that Bill says, and Bill has stated a demon will not scratch you. It won't scratch you. It will fillet you. You will bleed. It will look like razor blades have cut you open, not just scratch marks that welt up on your skin.
Yeah, Bill learned a lot from me, didn't he?
Did he?
Ooh. I'm teasing, Bill. I love you.
Yeah, and Rosie said Hannibal, which is Hannibal Lecter's sister. So that's what.
Could be.
And Nikki
Could be.
said, and Nikki pointed out, she goes, I won't go shopping at antique stores. And she won't buy things from there. She just refuses.
That you know what, Nikki? That's a good thing because you don't know objects can have attachments. They
Right.
can. but you don't know, like people that collect Ouija boards, and there are a lot of people that do. And I just say you got to be careful because you get a Ouija board. Say it's a Ouija board. It's 100 years old.
Hmm.
How do you know that board? How who owned it or how they used it? Maybe it was used in some satanic rituals at
Right.
one point.
Yeah.
I said it's not worth subjecting yourself, especially if you have a family. You've got other people that live in the home, and they always attack the weakest link.
Yeah.
They're always going to go after the weakest link, and if you provoke, even if you're someone that's very knowledgeable and you know what to do, it's going to go after one of your loved ones.
Right.
It'll go after your marriage, your finances, your occupation. You can get fired from a job. You could lose all your money. I mean,
Yeah.
these things do
It
happen.
doesn't have to be you specifically. Right.
Right. It'll go after what you love the most because that's how it's going to hurt you. That's how it's going to break you down. It wants your soul. At the end of the day, their ultimate end game is to get your soul.
Yeah.
It wants you to give up. I don't believe that a demon can kill a person because God wouldn't allow it, but it could certainly beat you up enough that you
Right.
lose your will to live. Look at Annalise Michelle.
Yeah.
She
Absolutely.
lost her will to live.
Yeah.
She stopped eating and drinking, and officially she died of malnutrition and dehydration. But it's not like the demon pushed her off a cliff.
Right.
But
Nutrition. It was.
yeah, it's
I mean, they have longer. They have a longer time to wear us down than we have to be alive. So and their patience is never ending. I mean, it's time does not. Time is a man-made object.
time and space doesn't
Right.
exist in the spirit world.
That's what I said. Time is a man-made object to help to
Yeah.
help identify certain things that happen. But yeah, for them it doesn't. It's non-existent. It's just whatever it is. So for them to wait us out is not a. It's not like it's hard for them to
Oh,
do.
they're very patient.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're gonna, like I said, they're gonna wait for you to be at your most vulnerable point,
Right.
and and that's when they're gonna strike.
Yeah.
Or that's when they can strike. Or like I said, they'll go after, like a good friend of mine, many years. He was like a brother to me for 30 years.
Yeah.
We worked on this very bad case years and years ago, where actually Father Bob had to come in and do a deliverance, and Bishop McKenna actually came in to do an exorcism in the home, and my friend was so adversely affected, and not only him, but two other very seasoned investigators will not go anywhere near this home
Really.
because so with my friend, it started going after his children.
Hmm.
And his son would see these horrific things and have these nightmares. It would visit him in his dreams. And he would tell me these horrible stories where it broke my friend down to the point where he's no longer in the work.
Right.
Psychologically, he's taken a hit. That did not happen to me, fortunately. I was very lucky and successful in protecting my family, very, strong in my faith.
Hmm.
My children even have said, Dad, we'd love to work with you. And so I'm like,
Mm.
no, I always just tell them, oh, you're too young, blah, blah, blah. We want to protect our children.
Right.
And one of my daughters, I remember one day she was a Weisenheimer. She's like, I was probably not that long ago because they're 26 now. I think they were 21, 22, and they wanted to go on a case with me. I said, no. I said, you're too young. I don't want to. She's like, well, Dad, you were 18 when you started. So I threw it back in my face. I said, yeah, you're right.
Right.
I see the point, but times were different then.
Right.
I mean, I wanted to do everything I could as we would as parents,
Right.
protect our children. There's no reason why my children, other than morbid curiosity, need to get involved in this work.
Yeah.
I was chosen. I was chosen. And I don't mean so much by the Warrens. I think I was chosen by God to lead this life. I mean,
Right.
40 years,
Yeah. And
has there been times where I wanted to hang it up? Yeah.
yeah.
There's times recently I've just, I've had enough of this. I've taken a beating. I've got health issues. I'm thoroughly convinced that at least, partial reason why I have the health issues I do is because of the work.
Yeah.
I've got heart issues. I got liver issues. And I got to be smart. If I get a case that I'm like, I can't go. I'm not feeling well enough. I'm not up to par.
Right. Yeah.
And I could become a victim. I mean, could I have a heart attack? Ed had his first heart attack after I think it was one of the exorcisms of Maurice Theriault. After he came home, I think that's when he had his first heart attack. I mean, could it be just coincidental? Yeah, sure. You could argue that point all day long. We could never prove that the work caused this, or was a contributing factor to the health issues, but my faith tells me that
Right.
it is.
Absolutely.
So I have to be smart about it. And like, look, if I'm not feeling well, I said, Bill, and Bill knows. That's why Bill's our COO. I said, Bill, I want you to do the day-to-day operations because right now I'm in a point in my life where I'm not physically well and I'm
Right.
working on my health. I can consult. I can still go out and try to do some educational speaking engagements. But if it comes down to actually going into a home and I'm not feeling well, I've got to be smart enough to say,
Right.
I'm not gonna say, oh, I'm a tough guy. I'm gonna go in
Right.
there. No, I'm
Yeah.
I'm a human being. I'm a man.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know.
And that's so that makes me, I mean, and I've thought this myself. You've been doing this your whole life. You think this is something you've been destined to do since you were at a young age. So, an answer that I know I will never get, but I've been asking now, then why was I chosen at such a late age to step into this role? You know, uh,
The timing was just right.
right. And so, but it's
Timing was right.
just interesting how the timing was right when I was 50, not when I was, you know, when I was younger and much stronger and also much more stupid. But um, it just makes me wonder
Well,
what am I stepping into now? Because I know that I'm not ever going to get the true, honest answer about why, but um, but
someday you will.
but
Someday you will.
but it just makes me wonder, and I'm more than happy to have stepped into this role. I love this role. I love the fact that I have been given these wonderful abilities to help everybody out and to help give information and to help give guidance and everything else. And I actually think because of my past and everything else that I'm built and bred to do this work.
Right.
You know,
Right. And that's the answer right there. You had to go through all life's trials and tribulations and the history that you've had and serving your country and all what you've been through.
yep,
God said, now it's time to, release these gifts.
yeah,
We just like we're never going to know in this lifetime.
right,
Someday I hope to have answers, but if they're not meant for me to have, then I won't.
yeah, yeah,
But yeah, you're right. I mean, I don't I don't question God. I think it's not our job to question God. You just got the faith that okay, God will put you where you need to be.
right,
My mom had a plaque. I'm looking at it right now because I love it. And it was a simple plaque with 4 words written on it. And she had it hanging in her home. It said, "Let go, let God.
yeah,
Let go." And I always coin a quote from John Lennon, if you've ever heard this. Said, "Everything will be all right in the end. And if it's not all right, it's not the end."
the end,
Never
right,
forget that. It's
yeah,
true, though. It's so true
yeah,
that things will work out.
yeah,
Things will work out in due time. And it may not be quick enough for us,
hmm,
but that's where you got to have faith. You can't give up.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. And that's why the education piece, again, I keep going back to that, is because, look, I'm older now.
hmm,
I want to try to help educate the next generation
right,
and give them whatever knowledge I've acquired over the years from my mentors, what I've picked up on my own through my friends. I mean, I could learn tons of stuff from you. You said you've only been doing this, what'd you say, 3 years?
years, yeah,
That doesn't mean you're doing it 3 years or 3 days, or you're
right.
doing it for 40 years. We can all learn from one another.
And I explain that to people. There's a reason why my show has the title "Stuff I Never Learned from a School Book," and I
Oh, I
enlighten
love it.
every single time. Every single time you come to watch my show, I don't care how stupid, goofy, whatever it is, you will always take away some piece of knowledge that you did not know before.
Yep.
So it is just something. And I love the way it's designed because it is an environment for people to relax, to enjoy, but they're always
Let
learning.
your hair down.
Yeah, or just get rid of it altogether. Um, but um, but they're always learning, and it's amazing because like you and I are on the show and we're the ones talking about it, but my family, my audience, but I call them my family because they know that they mean everything to me. Without
Hmm.
them, I wouldn't have a show.
We're
Um,
all family.
yeah, exactly. But I appreciate them coming on. But they teach me so much just
Yeah.
by simply commenting. I'm like, oh, I didn't even think about that, or something along those lines. So so it's awesome that the show is designed that way, and I get to bring people on like you that have done stuff for 38 years, whatever, and have learned from people who started it basically, and brought it forward. And now, like you said, you're moving it on to the next generation. Well, luckily,
Yeah.
even though I'm an older person, I'm part of that next generation as far as I feel, because I'm coming in new. Um, so that's kind of how I see it, for me.
But you're coming in at the perfect time.
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, I'm not going to be around forever. I don't know how much longer I have. I could get hit by a bus tomorrow. I hope I don't, but
right.
I just figure, okay, maybe, as I do my lecturing, there's most of the audience is probably just because they want to hear these stories.
Hmm.
They're fascinated by it, but they don't want anything to do with it themselves because they're
Right,
too afraid. But you'll get some people in the audience that may be part of a group, or maybe they're thinking of starting their own group, but their heart's in the right place. They're like, geez, Joe, I just want to help people. How
right,
do I get started? And I said, well, this is how you get started, by getting some education. I said, I can't teach you everything because I don't know everything.
right.
I'm still learning myself, but I am willing and eager to teach people what I do know.
No, yeah,
And what I've learned, I've surrounded myself, and they say a good leader surrounds themselves with people that are smarter than them.
yeah.
I mean, I've got you, I've got Bill, I've got too many to mention. Father Ken, Father Bob. I mean, these people you guys are all smarter than me.
Uh,
You
that's
know,
questionable. So that's questionable.
take
So
the compliment.
we've met.
We broke bread,
Right, right. Um,
literally.
Literally, but yeah.
Yeah.
But no, so I mean, so it's nice that, and like I said, we're already on an hour 36 minutes. Just so you know, we've just been blobbing forever. So,
Wow.
but it just
I
goes right.
never shut up. Good
By.
thing Laurel's not home.
She'd be down there like, Tom, just tell him to stop. Tom, just tell him to stop.
She's just sitting there shaking her head. See, I tell everybody I have 3 children. She has 4.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm a
Uh,
big man, baby.
but she is such a
Butter
huge
bear.
part of you. Like, she's such a huge part of you.
She is.
And it's fantastic because I got the privilege of meeting both of you, and not just because you were sitting behind a table, but I actually got to go sit at dinner with you, and I got to go have talks with you afterwards. I got to do all these other wonderful things with you. So I was able to see how well she fits in and helps basically really guide you. And a lot of the stuff you do on day to day, even though you're the one who's been doing everything, she is such a big part of it in the
Oh,
background.
she's my soulmate. She's my
Yeah,
world. I would not, and I say because she's probably not listening anyway, but I wouldn't be the man I am today without Laurel, without
yeah,
my wife. I mean, we've been together. Like I said, I was 18 when I met her. We met the Warrens together, and that was not a coincidence. I'll
right.
never believe that. That was fate.
Yeah,
And when I studied Greek mythology in high school. There's a famous There's a famous quote by the Fates. If you ever heard of the Fates,
hmm. Oh yeah,
and the quote is, "That which is fated must come to pass, but against my fate no man can kill me."
hmm.
Meaning, what you're destined to do, what you're destined to become, you're going to become.
Gonna become. Yeah,
Oh, sorry, my dog's going to knock over the camera. Come on, buddy. But I mean, no. But as far as Laurel goes, without her love and support, and believe me, there's been many times she's not happy with me. I mean, I was working on cases. I remember I was on a case once when she was home pregnant with the twins.
hmm.
Yeah, I mean, she had me on speed dial, but she's like, "No, go," because she knew that I was out trying to help somebody.
Right. So,
I wasn't out just having fun,
right. That was
because that would be really irresponsible. People would hate me if like you left your pregnant wife home,
yeah.
with twins. She was like 7 months pregnant at the time, and I said because I was out trying to help somebody.
Right. And that was a two-sided conversation. You left out the other part. She said, "Look, you can go because you're trying to help others, but by God, you better not bring something back with you."
I had to be very careful. You're right.
Hmm.
I had to be very careful, and I had to protect myself, and I had to pray. And that's another thing I tell people is like, if you're going to go out on investigations, for fun, or if you're really helping somebody, make sure you are in a state of grace,
Yeah.
or what we call a state of absolution. Make sure that your soul is clean of all sin.
Yeah.
because you could be the next victim.
Right.
You have to do it right. I can't stress that enough. And that's where the education part comes in.
Right.
And education on how to investigate, what questions to ask, how to use equipment, what equipment to use, what
Right.
equipment is bollocks.
Right.
There's equipment out there selling for hundreds, thousands of dollars. People see it on TV or on YouTube, like, well, they use it and they're getting these responses. I got to go buy it.
Yeah.
People
Right.
go in debt
Yeah.
to buy this, what they call ghost hunting equipment. And I'm like,
Yeah.
really? Seriously?
Yeah. I don't know if Bill's still on here. I really hope he is. But
You got
simply,
tired of me an hour ago.
simply because um, for him, specifically for him, I want people to know that he is the expert, the almighty expert on orbs. So he is the one to turn
Yep.
all your orb. If you get pictures of orbs, if you get videos of orbs, please send them to Bill Slevin.
Yeah.
He will appreciate them, and he will tell you how right you are, and that they are just absolutely they are your loved ones, or they are this. So he's gonna
It's funny you brought that up because
kill me for that if he actually sees that.
the only thing I told Bill, and I tease him all the time, I said, when you answer people, just use a little more tact, because and I tease him about this because when people have sent me videos and pictures, countless over the years, and it's hard to tell from a picture.
Right.
You can't really tell just from a picture, but what I'll do is I'll say, you know what, this is a very interesting photo. I think you may have something here. Thank you for sharing.
Right.
But they'll be like, well, Joe, what do you make of this? Or is this a demon? I'm like, probably not.
Right.
But, I want to let them down. I don't want them to say, oh, this guy's a jerk. He told me that it wasn't an orb. It was just
Right.
dust or water vapor. Or, I love him. Bill's just like, it's just dust. What are you, an idiot? No, he
Yeah.
doesn't say that.
I know he'll be like, no, this
Oh,
is
but just let them down gently. You don't want to crush their spirit.
right. I know. I love it, and it's funny because now everyone
He's
is.
probably laughing his ass off right now.
Well, it's funny because now everybody's responding with, "Here you go, build the orb combo, build the orb master." So
But in all seriousness, you're right. Bill has a lot of knowledge, even more than me,
fantastic.
about orbs because he's done his homework. He's
Right?
done his research,
He
which is
identified
why the research and the education
so
part is so important.
right?
So
And
important.
but I love teasing him about it. So and then
Oh, so am I.
oh, absolutely. So I just want everyone else to be on the conversation too. Just happy that there's a lot of people in the conversation already that know what I'm talking.
And he won't beat me up because he knows I'm handicapped.
He won't beat me up because he knows I'm bigger than he is. So
Yeah. No, you just turn him into a stork.
right?
I love those stories.
Yeah, there's a lot of those.
I'm glad you're on my side, brother. That's all I got to say.
There's a lot of those stories that people don't know that we had behind the scenes. So
Yeah, and they won't know because none of their business. But
right, but yeah. So I'm sorry, Bill hasn't responded. So he must not be on here. He must have got tired of hearing us talk. He figures he hears from us enough.
he's
So
probably responding to some orb pictures through email or something.
probably. So
Right, breaking somebody's heart.
so I think we're getting to a good point. But I have a couple questions. I have one question for you, but it's two parts.
Okay.
Before I let you go, I want to know the best piece of advice that both Ed and Lorraine separately gave you, whether it be in life, whether it be investigations, whatever it is. What are the two best pieces of advice that you have been given by those two fantastic people?
Mm-hmm. Well, I know because I spent a lot of time with Ed,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of it I've already mentioned before is make sure you ask the right questions. Make sure you're prepared. Right down to, hey, I remember him saying a good investigator always has holy water and a flashlight. But seriously, make sure you're always prepared.
Right.
Yeah, if you don't have it on your person, make sure it's in your vehicle.
Right.
Because you never know. Father Ken and I had an issue in Plattsburgh, New York, back in 2022, where we were just at our table, meeting and greeting people and everything. And a couple of young men came up to us, and we believe one of the gentlemen had a demonic attachment.
Hmm.
And we went into another room for about a half hour to an hour and had some conversation with him. And Father Ken was praying prayers of deliverance, and he had a very adverse reaction to the holy water.
Oh, I bet.
I actually had my rosaries that were blessed by Pope Francis. I got them from a friend of mine brought them back from the Vatican.
Mm-hmm.
I had them in my hand. No one could see them. They was there, and even Father didn't even know I had it because this was a trick that Ed taught me
Mm.
using religious provocation. And when we sat the gentleman down in the chair, I took my hand and I put it on his back, and he shot up out of that chair like his pants were on fire. Because whatever attachment this gentleman had obviously knew what was in my hand,
Your hand.
but
Right.
nobody else did.
Right.
Okay, so always be prepared. A good investigator, always has the proper equipment and is ready. I mean, you try to be ready. I mean, no one can ever be ready for every scenario.
Right.
But in that case, Father Ken and I, we were prepared. We were ready. We weren't expecting it,
Right.
but he had his prayer book with him, his deliverance prayers, his exorcism prayers. Lorraine, God love her, was always very close to to God. She was very into her religion, and she taught me about Saint Padre Pio. Saint Padre Pio is Lorraine's protector. Okay, and now he's kind of mine, because I tell people, if you ever look at some old photos of Lorraine, Amityville, for example, there's some pictures of Lorraine, and I'm trying to show you in the camera here.
Yeah.
With her hands cupped.
Yeah.
But very few people know that in her hands she had a relic of Saint Padre Pio. He was her protector. And so being very strong and devout in your faith,
Right.
Which I am, I'm not a holy roller. I don't go to church every week like I should, I'll admit.
Right.
But I talk to God every day.
Right.
Because Lorraine was like, you need to be right with God. Okay. And you gotta be right with your faith. All right. I don't believe, and I've had conversations with my parish priest through the years. I said, Father, I don't believe I need to be in this building once a week.
Right.
For God to hear me. God is everywhere.
Right.
So there was so much advice that they gave me, but with Ed, I know it was always be prepared.
Right.
Always be prepared. Always protect yourself and those around you. All right. So you always say, envision everyone around you, everyone involved, whether they're present physically or not, in a Christ light. And the way I explain it to people is, picture yourself in a snow globe, and that barrier is impenetrable.
Yeah.
Your faith is the barrier. It's not a piece of glass. It's just your faith is that barrier.
Right.
And your prayers and your faith in God keep evil at bay.
Right.
Always make sure you educate yourself, which is why I love going to their classes.
Yeah.
What's so important to me is that I was chosen by them.
Right.
Or chosen by God, but I was chosen by them. I remember she saying, would you like to become one of our students and come and work with us? So that's what I mean when I say I have a very unique history, and I love sharing that with people.
Right.
And unfortunately, I hate to say this, but that has made some people in my life very jealous of me, and they would take it out on me.
Yeah.
And they would accuse me of overshadowing them or taking attention away from them, when I'm just standing there going,
right.
People are coming up to me and asking me questions and want to learn about what it was like to work with Ed and Lorraine Warren. But yet I'm being crucified for something that's completely out of my control.
And unfortunately, that says more about them than it does you. And that shows them.
It just hurts. It hurts deeply.
It does. And just for your fair warning, Bill did pop back in and said, I was told we were talking about orbs. And Asia said, yeah, I brought him back on. So,
yeah.
So Nikki does have a question, because you're talking about blessed items.
Yes.
She's asking, how long does something that is blessed last? Do you have to get them re-blessed after something negative?
No, I don't think so. It's not a bad idea.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very good question. It's probably something I'd probably defer to Father Ken or Father Bob. I'm not sure if they're still with us.
Yeah, Father Ken's
still. I believe once it's blessed, it's blessed.
Right.
Once something is properly blessed, it's blessed. If you want to have it blessed again, there's nothing wrong with that.
And I still wear the two pieces that you and Bill gave me at Orlando. I wear those a lot. I mean, a lot. and it's just because it's comforting to me, because I know where they came from, and I know that they're blessed.
And you believe in it.
And I believe it. And
that faith that you have in those items is the power.
Right.
That's your protection.
Right.
You know, it's
Because me, I have a cross on my arm because
mhm,
I was raised Pentecostal Christian. My grandfather was a preacher,
mhm.
and so I have that same belief. But for you and Bill to both to give me something that would have been blessed by people that you trust, love, and respect because of their faith and what they
Yes.
do, then that means a lot to me. So that gives me the faith to to trust what I've been given because you trust them.
Right.
So
Right. And some people will say, um, some people will say, or might at least think it. Well, that doesn't make sense to me. And I say, and then that's when I do a lot of quotes, but these are things I've learned, life's lessons
yeah,
from the movie Miracle on 34th Street, the
yeah,
original.
yep,
There's a line in the film where he says, "Faith is believing in something that common sense
yeah,
tells you not to."
yes,
And when you think about that, that is so true because faith is believing in something that's not tangible. You can't touch it. Maybe you can't smell it. You can't see it. But the analogy I use is air. Do we believe in air? Well, yeah, oxygen. It sustains life. We
right,
breathe it, but can we really see it? Can we touch it?
right,
But we know it's there.
right, yep,
And yet everyone has to believe in something.
yep,
Even people that are atheists, it's like you got to believe in something.
yeah,
Some people are like, well, I believe that once we die, we die. That's it. We take a dirt nap, and that's it. Well,
well,
that's your prerogative to believe that.
right, right,
And I'm not going to try to change your mind. I'm not going to disrespect you. If that's the way you were raised, or that's your beliefs.
yeah,
I'm not going to waste time or energy trying to change your mind. It's like the people that don't like the Warrens. I'm like, look, I loved these people as if they were my own grandparents.
right,
I said, but I'm not going to waste my time or energy trying to convince you to like them.
right.
I said, it's like these people that call themselves debunkers, yet they say they don't believe in ghosts or demons. Well, then you can't be a debunker because
Why are
you
you
at
doing
least have
something?
to have an open mind about it.
Right, yeah, yeah.
If your mind is closed,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah. I know an eternal skeptic, but his job is to debunk everything, and I'm like, oh well, okay, well, you have
look,
to.
I'm a skeptic.
Yeah, I am
I mean,
too.
you have to be.
I have to go into everything as a skeptic.
You're
So,
absolutely right. I totally agree with you. But
so
I
and
know this stuff exists because I've lived it.
right,
I've lived through this. I've seen. I've felt. I've been physically attacked by things.
yeah,
And I'm here to tell the tale. But I try to use that as knowledge to help. Again, as I say, educate the next generation.
right,
And if I can help that one person, I've accomplished my mission.
yeah,
And I don't want fanfare. It's not about that. It's not about it. That's where you get the people that embody. I say that they embody the seven deadly sins.
hmm,
One of them, the biggest one, is pride.
right,
It's ego. Nobody knows who you are. They want to be known. They want their name in lights.
hmm,
Why? That's the devil's work.
right,
Okay. If for me, this was a vocation. I felt I was meant to do this. This is what I was chosen to do, and I'm going to do it as long as I can.
right.
And when it's time, I'm getting in my later years. If I can help educate other people to take over,
Then fantastic.
that's the goal.
That's the next step you're meant to do. You're still teaching, so you're just
But I
moving
mean,
on to the
but
next
but
step of it.
but the jealousy out there it's crazy because
Oh,
people want to learn from you and they want to come up and talk to you and ask you questions, and because you're not the center of attention, you get mad at the person that's being asked the questions is crazy. We talked about this last night, but
right,
it hurts me deeply
and
because
it's you know because you're trying to do good by others, but they're not seeing it that way, and it's frustrating.
well, I
And
pray for them. I pray they'll see the light someday and they'll come around.
and just so you know, tied to that, Bill has stated that he's going to move you further away from him at MegaCon because you hog all the people.
Yeah, well, that's because of another reason that we won't mention, but Bill knows he can't compete with me in that area. So
Uh,
I
Michelle
love you, Bill. You know that.
Michelle is on here. Hi, Michelle, and she is asking, do you ever feel like you're breaking the laws of the universe by talking to the dead?
Do I?
Yeah,
No, I don't. I talk to my mom and dad. They're dead.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
they're alive in my heart.
yeah.
I mean, I don't, but if she believes that, then God
Yeah,
bless you, Michelle. You can believe whatever you want, and I don't judge.
but
You know,
she's
but no, I don't. I talk to the dead all the time. I talk to my grandparents. I talk to Ed and Lorraine. I talk to my parents.
yeah, and
I
if she,
ask for guidance. I ask them to pray for me. They're in a better place than I am.
yeah,
I'm
and
the sinner. I'm the one who needs saving.
if she's directing that question towards me because she knows that I can talk to Dad just like she
Oh,
can.
with your gifts, you mean?
Right.
Oh,
So I don't know which one she's talking to, but my answer is still no. Because why? Because I believe I was given these gifts by
you
God.
were. You
So,
were.
so I don't believe that I'm breaking the laws of the universe. I am not going to be given anything that it is my decision of everything
Right.
I'm giving if I want to use it for good or for bad.
That's right. Free
And
will.
I
Free
have
will.
to do it to help others. Uh,
Now, to answer that question, that if you're conjuring, if you're
correct.
using Ouija boards, tarot cards, divining rods, whatever, psychometry. If you're using it for purposes other than to help,
Right.
then that's bad. That's wrong.
Hmm.
You have gifts, God given gifts. He gave
Right.
you those gifts for a reason to help others.
Yeah. And that's why I feel if Michelle, because she's a, cause this, you know, we all have we she has the same gift too. So, but
It's a very good question, Michelle, and
yeah,
you know
it's
what? That's
fantastic.
great.
But I don't feel like I'm breaking the laws of the universe because I
No,
think it was given to me to help others, and that's exactly how I use it. I don't use it for parlor tricks. I don't use it for ill intentions. I use it because someone needs to hear something.
yeah.
And if they're not, then they're not going to talk to me. I'm not going to receive that message, or it's not mine to give.
Well, I say when you receive your messages, when people with these gifts receive messages, that's a miracle in my eyes.
Right? Yeah.
But then you got a lot of fakers out there that just make stuff up. Now that's wrong because now you're playing with people's emotions.
Right.
You've got a person in front of you that is desperately looking for answers or trying to reach out to a deceased loved one. Maybe they've got unfinished, things they want to say to them, and they're looking for help. But if you're not gifted, and believe me, I know some people that aren't, they fake it till they make it kind of thing.
Oh, right.
Now they're messing around with those people's emotions, knowing full well that they don't have the answers and they're not really receiving the answers. And just to make stuff up, that's an abomination.
Right.
That's that's
That's
terrible.
yeah.
All for the sake of ego. And
That's the wrong
and
intention.
that's
Right.
yeah, that's just wrong.
And she responded back and she says the reason I asked is because I've come across some spirits that did not want to talk and I got mad about it and got mad about it. It was just something I thought about I was doing wrong maybe. But I do feel like I have a gift for this. And yeah, and Michelle, you're right. I mean, for me, if they don't want to talk, then it's not my message to receive, or it's not my message to give to someone else. Maybe they're not meant to have that message yet. Maybe spirit's
Right,
not talking to them for that reason. There's
right.
always a reason for what's going on. But for me, I don't think it's because what we're doing is wrong. Because we're doing it for the correct intentions. So, um, well, Joe, I think I'm probably going to wrap it at that point. We're 2 hours in.
You had enough of me, huh?
No, but because
I've had enough of me.
because I also know that you're an hour ahead of me, so it's 10 o'clock your time. Um, but I also know that I'm going to do like well, I'm going to basically tell you that I'm going to have you come back on again. Um,
Oh, I would love to, Tom.
so,
Thank you so much.
yeah, and I know how to get a hold of you now. I mean, outside of just having your phone number and us talking, anyways, I know that in order to get attached with you, I need to go through Asia to get everything set up because
I know. I
yes.
know.
So I just know that so Asia just expect to hear from me a lot now on.
She keeps me on the straight and narrow when it
She
comes to this stuff.
she kind of has to.
Well, she does because I forget to put stuff
Well,
in my calendar, and I'm like, "Oh God, I got a podcast tonight. Oh, I forgot all about it."
I also know that she's also deals with other people as well. Like she handles other people as well, and
Yeah.
she understands that she is literally hurting cats because you guys don't keep your own life straight without her. So
I tell you, she is wonderful. She is awesome. She's very organized. She keeps us all in check, especially me.
yeah,
But she has been a godsend. I met her last year, and I firmly believe God brought her into my life to help.
yeah,
to help me personally and to help with this work. So,
Yeah, and I
big
and I
shout out to Asia for all her help.
and I just
Thank
met
you.
her, and because she helped set this up to get me to put us on the show together,
Yeah,
and I'm looking forward to meeting her and getting to know her more and everything else because she just seems like an honestly good person,
she
and
is.
so
She
I
is.
want so that's and I'm glad that I'm associated with her now. So everyone
Thank you.
is I know you can't see the messages, but the messages are coming in saying thank you for such a good show, awesome guest as always. I agree. Great night,
Thank you.
everything else. So everyone's coming in with positive comments. Do me a favor, Joe Bo, but don't run away. I'm just going to put you backstage while I
Okay.
put the show down, and then I'll come back and talk to you here in a second. So
Okay.
so everyone say good night to Joe. Good night, Joe. Love
Thank
you.
you. God bless everyone. Thank you so much. You've been so kind. I appreciate it.
And I will be right back with you in a second. Let me close the show.
Okay.
All right, everyone, that's the show. For those of you who did not, who were not on the show at the beginning, um, I will not be having another show until the 14th of July. So 3 weeks without me and the wonderful beard. Um, So feel free to watch the reruns, whatever else. Don't be surprised though if I randomly pop in like I did last week on a Sunday, I think it was, and just kind of pop in to say hi to everybody randomly because Nikki and I will be on vacation. Nikki and I are actually going out to South Lake Tahoe to spend a week together and to just kind of take take some time off during the summer before she has to go back into school world, and we're going to kind of get her energized back up and everything else. So I will not have a show again until the 14th of July because after that I also have to leave and I'll be going to Alaska for work. Darn the luck. But again, don't be surprised if I do a quick pop in while I'm there as well because I just like popping in to see how everyone's doing every once in a while. The last time I popped in for a short amount of time, I ended up being online for about an hour. It just happens. So, oh, and Rosie keeps picking on me, and she says she just keeps listening to the podcast of Elementals because that's one of the podcasts I actually have out there. Um, but just so you know, on the 14th, when I do come back on, it is me. I will be doing an open mic night. So be ready for that. Bring your questions, bring your comments, bring your complaints, bring whatever, and I'll answer everything I can. Um, so just know that the 14th of July will be open mic night. It's just going to be the bearded one on here, answering questions as I can. Lots of squirrel moments as normal, and that's basically how we're going to run it. So other than that, stay safe. Hopefully, I see you when I pop in. Nikki and I may pop in a couple times while we're out in Tahoe just to say hi and send some pictures and let y'all see what we're doing. Other than that, stay safe. Much love. I appreciate y'all. Send me emails as you need it. Oh, you know what? I totally didn't do that. Just for some people who need it. Let me do that really quick. There's my information on the bottom. Stuff I never learned from a school book. Everything is listed under stuff I never learned. Facebook, stuff I never learned. YouTube, stuff I never learned. Kick, Instagram, Twitch. It's all under stuff I never learned. My email, stuff I never learned at gmail.com. I had to keep it simple for me so I can keep it straight. So it's simple for all of you. Other than that, stay safe. Much love. I will talk to you all whenever we decide to pop in and say hi. Otherwise, I'll see everyone on July 14th. Take care. Much love.